I thought catching my wife cheating was the worst part, until she and her ex tried to rob me. Yep, you heard that right. They broke into my house to steal my safe, thinking they'd walk away with everything. What they didn't expect. It's like a plot twist straight out of a bad novel. Well, it looks like they're about to become the newest residents of the local correctional facility. Let me kick things off by mentioning that my wife, who's 28 and definitely female, has a knack for making questionable choices, something she perfected long before we ever started dating. She had a knack for picking some real winners, enjoyed her fair share of drinks, and found herself in a series of rather questionable escapades. As a young adult, she was quite the little firecracker. For example, she got into medical school and then decided to drop out, all just to give her dad a good chuckle. They're getting along just fine these days, but she can't help but wish she had wrapped up med school. Well, her wild child days seem to be a thing of the past, or at least that's what I believed. When we kicked off our dating adventure 4 years back, she had transformed into a whole new version of herself. She was finally getting her act together and promised herself that the old ways were a thing of the past. Her willingness to be upfront about it added a sprinkle of trust to my opinion of her. She had returned to school and was as sober as a judge. Now she was stuck in a dull office job, where the only thing stronger than her coffee was her desire for a little excitement. But her transformation was as fleeting as a summer breeze, and little did I know that a storm was brewing just around the corner. It all kicked off with those unmistakable signs we all know too well. Sometimes she'd waltz in late, and when I inquired about her whereabouts, she'd casually drop that she'd been out with friends, as if that explained everything. It was as if her mood towards me had a mind of its own, flipping like a pancake on a hot griddle, one moment sunny side up, the next, well, let's just say it could use a little more cooking. There were moments when she was all over me, showering me with affection, and I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest husband on the planet. It was as if she was putting on a show, trying to compensate for those times when she was as silent as a library on a Sunday afternoon. She could easily lose herself for hours, completely tuning me out whenever we found ourselves in that situation. The inconsistency was like a pesky fly buzzing around my head, and soon enough, I found myself spiraling into a worry fest. One thing about me is that I don't let nonsense linger for too long. So, on a day when she was feeling particularly friendly, I decided it was time for a little chat. I laid out all my worries, like a buffet of grievances, about how she would waltz in late some nights without so much as a heads up. And let's not forget the times when she'd turn as sour as a lemon and give me the silent treatment for what felt like an eternity. I mentioned to her that we were in this together, and if any issues popped up, we really ought to chat and tackle them as a team. She gazed off into the horizon for a bit, her mouth taking a vacation while her mind seemed to wander off to who knows where. There I was, utterly befuddled. Was she upset with me? Did I accidentally step on her toes or something? And that's when she decided to let the cat out of the bag. She said she had been biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to spill the beans, and apparently, this was it. Cue the dramatic music. Just hearing those words sent a delightful shiver down my spine. Well, if you thought that was a prelude to sunshine and rainbows, I've got a bridge to sell you. I steeled myself for some bad news, but when it came, it landed like a surprise uppercut from a boxing champ. She casually dropped the bomb that she was dating someone new. For a few weeks now, the suspense had been building, and she had every intention of spilling the beans to me. She was utterly clueless about it. I plopped down, attempting to soak in all that information like a sponge at a water park, minus the thrill and the splashes, of course. I really hoped it was just a silly joke, but the look on her face said she was as serious as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. She had that look in her eyes, like a soap opera star on the verge of a dramatic breakdown. It felt a bit peculiar. I was gazing at the woman I'd adored for years, yet somehow it felt like I was staring at a complete stranger. It was like I'd wandered into a novel where the plot twist hit a little too close to home. At long last, I mustered the courage to inquire about his identity. She fell quiet once more, and when she mentioned his name, her gaze seemed to take a vacation somewhere far away. The reason she couldn't meet my gaze was that the fellow, Jason, happened to be her ex. Ah, the joys of romantic history. The fella she had parted ways with a few months before we began our own little adventure together. She felt a bit sheepish about the whole situation, realizing she was playing footsie with her ex behind my back. Well, she ought to be, don't you think? It was a real train wreck. Jason was more than just a former flame. He was the one who had, in theory, given her a good scare to set her on the right path. She had warned me that he was like a walking disaster zone, full of toxic vibes, masterful manipulation, and a knack for landing himself in hot water. She referred to him as the grandest blunder of her life. After he found himself behind bars for turning a bar brawl into a one-man show of unconsciousness, she figured it was high time to hit the reset button on her life. And here she was, casually dropping the bomb that she was picking him over me. A little voice inside me was itching to raise a fuss. I couldn't help but wonder why she'd pick a criminal loser when she had a loving, stable husband right in front of her. It's like choosing a soggy sandwich over a gourmet meal. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack while blindfolded, utterly baffling. I was itching to get a peek into the mind behind it all, but for some reason, I kept my curiosity to myself. Competing with someone like Jason? Yeah, that was a hard pass for me. If she felt like taking a dive into that pool of nonsense, then by all means, let her take the plunge. I had no intention of tossing my dignity out the window just because she seemed to have misplaced hers somewhere along the way. I just sat there, keeping my mouth shut and my curiosity in check, like a cat watching a mouse but not quite ready to pounce for the juicy details. I inquired about what lay ahead. I had a pretty good idea of what was headed our way. Well, that was that. We were done for good. But I was curious about what her grand scheme for the future looked like. I gently nudged her memory about our little piggy bank project for the dream house of ours. We had this grand plan to dive into the world of parenthood. We had even been chatting about her heading back to college. Jason was as generous as a squirrel hoarding acorns, none of that was coming her way. I wasn't exactly aiming to sweep her off her feet with that move. I simply wished she'd have an epiphany about the colossal blunder she'd stumbled into. Yet, she was blissfully unaware of it all. She suddenly decided to unleash her fury on me. She mentioned that Jason had undergone a transformation in prison and had really gotten his act together. She insisted she was done with him, but it turned out I was just her emotional crutch while she was busy trying to escape from him. Her heart was still hanging out with him, like an old friend who just won't take the hint to leave the party. She mentioned that the light bulb went off when they caught up not long after he got out. I was absolutely flabbergasted by what was coming out of their mouth. She really had a way of making herself sound, well, a bit foolish. She was tossing aside our entire life together for some ridiculous daydream of romance. It's all about a fellow who found himself in handcuffs for throwing punches over something that really didn't matter at all. It brought to mind those bewildering women who seem to have a thing for serial killers, as if they're auditioning for a role in a twisted romance novel. I didn't whimper or plead. I nodded like I was the wisest sage in the room and politely suggested she make her exit. She looked at me, her eyes as wide as saucers, like she'd just seen a ghost, or maybe just my cooking. She looked like she'd just stumbled into a riddle wrapped in a mystery, and I was left scratching my head trying to figure out what had her so flummoxed. Perhaps she thought I would throw on my armor and charge into battle for her heart. Well, that was a pipe dream, wasn't it? She was about to give me a masterclass in self-worth, but I had no intention of joining her on that particular stage. All she said was, "Is that it?" I inquired about her additional desires. She had her sights set on Jason, and honestly, who could blame her? The door was wide open for her to make that leap. I had no intention of putting the brakes on her ambitions. But she just couldn't stick around any longer. I wouldn't want to catch some serious side-eye by snoozing under the same roof as another guy's lady. That's just asking for trouble, right? I was nothing like her. She simply fixed her gaze on me, not a word escaping her lips. It was clear she was offended, her brow was furrowed like she was trying to solve a particularly tricky crossword puzzle. When she opened her mouth, she said, "So, you don't care about me at all." I mentioned to her that she had been on my mind quite a bit. I had a love for her that outshone everyone else in the universe. Well, she just dropped the bomb that she picked someone else instead of me, and honestly, I couldn't care less about her now. She mentioned that it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. It's not like you can just flip a switch and poof, feeling's gone. If only it were that easy, right? I chose to keep my lips sealed on that one. It was clear as day that she was just spinning a tale to make her little escapade with Jason seem more palatable. I simply said, "You should probably head out now." She just went with the flow. She and Jason had likely been counting down the days, dreaming of this moment, and now, here they were, finally ready to dive into the adventure together. As she busily stuffed her belongings into bags, I remained in the living room, wrestling with my own thoughts like a cat trying to catch its tail. I like to believe I kept my cool, but inside, I was a total train wreck. My entire existence had just taken a nosedive thanks to some no-good ex I was convinced had vanished into thin air. I felt like letting out a primal roar and smashing a few things, but I figured I'd spare her the joy of witnessing just how much she'd gotten under my skin. She made a few attempts to chat while she was shoving her belongings into boxes, but I gave her the old silent treatment. I completely missed her until she was all packed up and standing at the front door, ready to make her grand exit. She had dialed up Jason, and there he was, patiently hanging out in his car like a cat waiting for its human to come home. The gentleman couldn't be bothered to descend and lend a hand with her boxes, as if they were made of feathers and not the heavy burdens they truly were. I stood there, a spectator to her epic battle with the bags as she wrestled them into the car. Jason and I locked eyes, and he gave me a nod, but I remained as still as a statue, not even a twitch to betray my thoughts. I simply fixed my gaze on the pair until they decided to make their grand exit. As soon as I stumbled back into the house, I flopped onto the couch like a sack of potatoes, utterly spent. I felt like a balloon that had lost its air, just floating aimlessly without a care in the world. My marriage had been as frosty as a winter morning lately, but now it seems like the whole house has joined in on the chill. I've kept this little nugget of my life under wraps, not spilling the beans to friends or family just yet. I can't quite put my finger on it. I reckon I need a little time to sort this out myself before I start dragging others into the mix. This is the first time I've spilled the beans to anyone, but I'm not entirely convinced it counts since I'm hiding behind a digital curtain here. Anyway, it's been quite the relief to have a spot to spill my thoughts. The very same fellow she claimed was her ultimate blunder? That's what we like to call turning trash into treasure, folks. And the way she delivered the news, you'd think she was waiting for a round of applause for finally spilling the beans. So, do you even care about me, or is this just a one-sided soap opera? Well, looks like someone just let the cat out of the bag about their little escapade with their prison pen pal X. So, what were you expecting to unfold here? So, you'd wrap her in a warm hug and lend a hand with the packing, huh? Here's the latest scoop. Guess who's back with a twist on my original post? Spoiler alert, it's not what you might think. Honestly, I can hardly wrap my head around what just went down. The whole situation took a twist that left me scratching my head in disbelief. Before we dive in, I just have to give a big shout out to everyone who took the time to reach out with their support and advice. You all are the real MVPs. While I don't believe I was in any danger of turning myself into a human pretzel, it was heartwarming to realize that folks actually cared. I decided to take the plunge and reach out to my friends and family, because who better to turn to than the people who know me best, right? I shared my little adventure with them, and let me tell you, the support was overwhelming. It was like having a cheering squad when the going got tough, and honestly, it made all the difference. It took me roughly a week to shake off the cobwebs and return to my usual self, like a bear emerging from hibernation, grumpy but ready to face the world again. Once I managed to clear my head, I rolled up my sleeves and set about tackling my next big project, getting a divorce. She had already moved in with someone new, while I was still stuck in the legal limbo of marriage. The idea didn't sit well with me, not one bit. I thought that a swift exit would be the best way to help me move on from her. After all, who needs a slow burn when you can have a clean getaway? I got in touch with a divorce lawyer, and just like that, we kicked off the whole process. I attempted to keep my hopes in check by reminding myself how these situations typically unfolded. It looked like a walk in the park, no kids to wrangle and no prized possessions to squabble over. But then he dropped the bomb, don't let your guard down. Thanks for the pep talk, right? Most of the time, divorce is like trying to untangle a ball of yarn that a cat has had a field day with, and just when you think you've got it sorted, it somehow gets even more complicated. Back then, I was blissfully unaware of just how spot on he really was. So there I was, locking up our joint account like it was a treasure chest, thinking I was being all responsible and adult-like. My lawyer suggested I safeguard my assets, which naturally included any joint accounts. Because, sharing is great until it comes to money. She could easily snag as much cash as her heart desired from them. We had the house fund sitting pretty in the shared account, and I'll be darned if I let her waltz off with that cash. I'm not sure if the bank sent her a little nudge, but the very next day, she rang me up, all curious, asking why I decided to put the account on ice. She sounded like I'd just pulled the rug out from under her, as if I'd gone and emptied the entire account. I told her I'd just put it on ice to keep things even, The court was going to play the role of the money referee, and she was not exactly thrilled with that outcome. She began yelling at me, claiming I was out to ruin her plans. She mentioned that Jason was in need of some cash to kick off a business, and, lo and behold, half of the funds in the account belonged to her. So, not only had he turned over a new leaf, but he had also donned the hat of an entrepreneur. Who knew a midlife crisis could come with a side of business savvy? Jason definitely had the vibe of someone who could hold up a town hall meeting all by himself. I gently reminded her that I had stashed most of the cash in that account, playfully pointing out that she was entitled to half of it as a little gesture of goodwill. And really, none of that mattered because, in the end, it was the court that would have the final say on its fate. Once that little event unfolded, she and her not-so-law-abiding boyfriend could take her share of the cash and indulge in whatever mischief their hearts desired. I was really banking on a nice, tidy division of things. I had a good chat with my lawyer about it more times than I can count, and he kept telling me that this was just the way the cookie crumbled. So, when the divorce wrapped up, I ended up with a bigger slice of the savings pie. Roughly 6 out of 10, give or take a few percentage points, because who's counting, right? It seemed only right to me, considering I was the one who tossed in more coins into the piggy bank. Well, there was that little hiccup of her cheating on me, but my wife had her sights set on a whole different kind of surprise. That 10% was like the last straw for her, tipping her right over the edge into a whole new realm of chaos. We had stashed away a decent chunk of change on our journey to homeownership, so her 40% was definitely not something to just brush off. It was quite a hefty sum, even surpassing what she had tossed into the account herself. In all honesty, she was winning this round, but stubbornness had her in a headlock, and she wasn't about to tap out. She took it upon herself to become my personal phone alarm, ringing me up without a moment's pause. I tried to be helpful at first, but all she did was unleash a torrent of colorful language while insisting on her rightful slice of the house fun pie. I mentioned to her that she had already hit the jackpot with the court, and there was no way she was getting another dime from me. Of course, she wasn't exactly jumping for joy at that news. When the calls began to sound like a pack of hungry wolves, I decided it was best to let them go to voicemail. And that's when she decided to play a little game of phone tag, dialing me from every number she could find. It seems she might have borrowed her friend's number to ring me up, or perhaps she was juggling a collection of throwaway phone numbers. Honestly, I have no idea how she managed to gather so many of them. So, I decided to take the plunge and block everyone. Now, I'm on a mission to screen calls from any number that doesn't ring a bell. It's like playing a game of phone roulette. One fine day, when one of her calls managed to sneak past my defenses, I casually mentioned that I might just have to dial up the police and file a harassment report if she didn't take a hint and ease up a bit. The calls may have ceased, but oh boy, did things take a turn for the dramatic in a whole new fashion. It all went down when I stepped out to toast a friend's birthday. It stretched into the wee hours, and we all indulged in a few drinks. I wasn't exactly 3 sheets to the wind, but let's just say my driving skills were on vacation. I hopped into a ride home with 3 of my pals, because what's better than a cozy car full of laughter and questionable singing? As they pulled away, I spotted my front door hanging ajar, like it was trying to tell me a secret. I came to a complete standstill, like a deer caught in headlights. The sight was so shocking that it knocked the buzz right out of me, like a cold splash of reality on a sunny day. Oh, I was absolutely certain I'd locked that door before I stepped inside. I mean, who wouldn't double-check their own fortress, right? My friends caught me gazing intently at the front door, and they trooped down to see what was up. I shared my observations with them, confidently declaring that I was convinced someone had waltzed right into my house uninvited. Upon giving the door a good once-over, we spotted some scratches and a bit of splintering in the doorframe, like it had been in a wrestling match with a particularly feisty squirrel. It seemed like someone had decided that the door needed a little more fresh air and had jammed it wide open. I dialed up the police faster than you can say emergency, because, let's face it, waiting around wasn't on my to-do list. We were all a bit on edge, wondering if the person was still in there, so we huddled outside like a bunch of anxious squirrels waiting for the police to show up. They arrived in roughly 10 minutes, as if they had a secret shortcut known only to the locals, or maybe they just had a really good GPS. At that point, we were fairly convinced that the place was as empty as a politician's promise, yet we opted to hang around outside like a couple of lost puppies. When the cops arrived, they gave the house a thorough once-over. The place was as empty as a politician's promise. They requested I take a little stroll through the house to see if anything had decided to play hide-and-seek. I glanced around, and honestly, everything looked just as it should, no surprises lurking in the corners, at least not today. The valuables were right where they should be, and everything was just as it had been. No chaos, no mess, just a perfectly ordinary scene. Had it not been for the front door, I might have just assumed the house was having a quiet day, maybe even a little too quiet, like it was trying to keep a secret from me. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just some bored teenager looking for a thrill, breaking in for kicks. Ah, the safe. How could I forget that little fortress of forgotten treasures? I had a safe tucked away in the room that doubled as my home office, because you never know when a rogue plot twist might need a secure hiding place. There it was, a medium-sized safe, the kind that required a duo of strong arms or at least one determined soul who was ready to channel their inner weightlifter. And guess what? It had vanished into thin air. All the other stuff was lounging around in my office, but the safe? That little rascal had vanished without a trace. I mentioned it to the police, and wouldn't you know it, they were on the same wavelength as me, straight to the safe, just like I figured. They clearly had a hunch about its location too. I was asked who was in the know about the safe, and I just laid it all out there, no embellishments, just the plain old truth. Well, my ex-wife was the sole keeper of the secret stash's location and the treasures hidden within it. They began jotting down a report, peppering me with questions about her like I was the keeper of some grand secret. I spilled the beans on it all, from the divorce saga to the wild antics surrounding those house funds. I mentioned her new boyfriend to them as well. I couldn't shake the feeling that she had spilled the beans to Jason about the safe, and together they were plotting a little heist to cover the cash I owed them. Classic, right? The safe held treasures that could fetch a pretty penny, thousands of dollars, if only you had the savvy to unlock its secrets. There I was, sitting on a crypto wallet that held a few $1,000s worth of Bitcoin, like a digital treasure chest waiting for its pirate to come along and claim the loot. The drive had a password, so the thief would have a tough time getting in, but losing it was still not on my to-do list. Along with a couple of other treasures, I had an heirloom watch from my grandfather tucked away in there too. It was one of those things that tugged at the heartstrings while also being worth a pretty penny. My ex was well aware of what was tucked away in there, and she definitely knew it had some serious value. She was clueless about the code, which might just explain why they had decided to haul off the entire safe, if it was indeed them. The police were pretty tight-lipped about my theory, just mentioning they'd had a chat with them. But I caught the officer's eyebrow raise when I dropped the bomb that Jason had just strolled out on parole. You could practically see the gears turning in his head. Once the police wrapped up their little visit, I dialed up a 24-hour locksmith to sort out the front door situation. My friends stuck around, patiently biding their time until he finally wrapped things up. They were chatting about heading over to Jason's place to give him a little lesson in life. I mentioned that I'd prefer to let the police handle things, but hey, I can't deny I was touched by the outpouring of support. Once the locksmith wrapped up his handiwork, I strolled out with my pals, ready for whatever mischief awaited us outside. That night, after the break-in, I felt about as safe as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs when it came to sleeping in the house. Jason had that unmistakable vibe of someone who'd returned just to pull off a ridiculous stunt, particularly if the safe remained stubbornly locked up tight. I decided to tag along with a buddy of mine to his place, figuring I could snag a spot on his couch for the night. Who doesn't love a good couch crash, right? The following afternoon, I received a call from the detective handling the case, as if he had been waiting by the phone like a kid waiting for a pizza delivery. He mentioned that they dispatched a team to investigate Jason and my former spouse. They approached him with a serious look, saying they needed to chat about a little incident involving a burglary nearby. He reluctantly agreed to chat with them, but let's just say he was about as calm as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs the entire time. He peeked through the crack in the door and, with all the innocence of a cat caught in the cookie jar, claimed he didn't know a thing about the burglary. Then my ex strolled over to see who he was chatting with. They claimed she was tipsy and not exactly thrilled to spot the cops. She swung the door open to have a chat, and there it was, a safe, half hidden under a blanket, just peeking out from the hallway like it was trying to play hide-and-seek. Well, according to the officer, that little tidbit was all they needed to waltz right into the house and snag it as evidence. Who knew legal loopholes could be so straightforward? The safe sported a collection of scratches around the door and keypad, a testament to their not-so-successful attempts at prying it open. They spun a yarn about discovering it on the roadside, claiming they intended to return it later. Classic, right? Well, they didn't see that coming, arrested right then and there, like a couple of characters in a poorly written crime novel. Well, it seems Jason found himself in a bit of a pickle, arrested for burglary and, to top it off, possession of some rather questionable property. Talk about a plot twist. My ex got pulled in too, but just for a little chat, nothing too dramatic. She wasn't on the hook just yet, but the detective casually mentioned that could flip at any moment. Her tale had more twists than a pretzel, and here she was, championing Jason's right to his little treasure trove of pilfered goods. They claimed it was just a ticking clock before they could nail her involvement down for good. They dragged me down to the station to verify that the safe was indeed mine. It was just a little box to tick off, nothing more than a polite nod in the grand scheme of things. Let's be real, everyone in the room was fully aware that it was my masterpiece. Believe it or not, I still clutched that receipt like it was a golden ticket to a chocolate factory. Well, would you look at that? I popped it open on the first go, and lo and behold, all my treasures, drives, documents, my beloved heirloom watch, and even that stash of emergency cash, were right where I left them. The police inquired whether I wanted to press charges, and with a grin, I cheerfully replied that I absolutely would. Well, it turns out they decided to throw my ex into the mix too. Once Jason figured out the pickle he was in for breaking his parole, he turned into the most helpful guy around. He confessed to the detectives that the whole scheme was her brainchild. They were itching to settle the score for the little incident where I had accidentally pocketed 10% of her cash. She casually mentioned my safe and the little treasure trove it held inside. She handed him the code, and he waltzed right in to clean it out. Well, wouldn't you know it? I had a little fun and switched up the code right after she packed her bags, leaving him locked out like a kid without a key on a Saturday morning. When they figured out that the door just wouldn't budge, they decided to waltz into the house, grab the entire safe, and make a grand getaway in his car. Two scheming geniuses of the underworld. She found herself in a bit of a pickle, facing charges for lending a helping hand and having a few items that definitely didn't belong to her. They're not behind bars just yet, but the wheels of justice are definitely turning. So, it turns out they're both in a bit of a pickle with felony charges hanging over their heads, and my lawyer is saying they might be trading their freedom for some serious time behind bars. Yikes. Given Jason's history, he's about to face the music in a way that even the most seasoned soap opera villain would envy. It looks like my ex could waltz away with a slap on the wrist if she decides to throw in the towel and plead guilty. I have a hunch she won't, but hey, life's full of surprises, right? It's quite amusing that I felt a wave of relief after wrapping up my court meeting with her, only for her to go and pull another ridiculous blunder. Well, here we are, back in the courtroom together once more, like an old pair of shoes that just can't seem to stay in the closet. She managed to wrangle her way out on bail, but poor Jason? Well, luck clearly took a vacation on his behalf. Looks like his little slip-up has landed him back behind bars, waiting for the trial to roll around. Talk about a plot twist. Not a peep from my ex-wife, it's like she's taken a vow of silence or something. I'm pretty confident she won't be foolish enough to come after me again, especially with her freedom dangling by a thread like a poorly tied shoelace. Oddly enough, this entire debacle has wrapped things up for me in a way I didn't expect. Well, my home got a surprise guest, and some of my stuff decided to take a little vacation, but hey, it really made me realize just how low my ex has sunk. Watching her in handcuffs, with her no-good boyfriend standing there like a bad extra in a low-budget film, really made me realize just how fortunate I am to have her out of my life. Talk about dodging a bullet. Honestly, her breaking up with me turned out to be a hidden blessing, like finding a 20 in an old pair of jeans. If you're navigating a similar situation, let me share a little nugget of wisdom I stumbled upon myself. Every now and then, toxic folks decide to take a high call on their own. It's like they've suddenly realized they're not the main character in your story after all. Every now and then, you just have to take matters into your own hands and do a little snipping yourself. Sure, it might feel like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle at first, but trust me, it's all for the greater good. Let them stew in their own mess while you keep on flourishing. Now that's what I call a masterclass in payback. So, let me get this straight, she actually attempted to rob you over a measly 10%? Talk about a dramatic reaction. It's a relief you had your pals by your side when the storm hit, and kudos for being savvy enough to secure those accounts, switch up your safe code, and let your legal eagles steer the ship. Cheers to fresh starts, sturdier locks, and a future where felons are just characters in a novel. Ever found yourself in a situation where someone, post-breakup or divorce, decided to play the role of the villain in your story? Ah, the drama. So, how did you tackle that little adventure? We'd love to hear your tales, so drop them in the comments below. Don't be shy, spill the beans. Thanks a bunch for hopping on board with us today in our room. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss our next adventure. Catch you later.